Okay, so, well, you were talking about you grew up in Davie County.
I was born there, and I lived there until I was in the seventh grade with my mom and dad. And I needed to go to high school. High school was in the eighth grade when I came along. And the schools were so poor. At that time, they had segregated schools, as you know. The white schools were poor, both of them, because the county is very poor, and the property it's not worth much. At least it wasn't. So I had to come to Winston-Salem to live with my great aunt. Finished Atkins High School with honors.
Okay.
And off to college and back teaching here. And I married my husband, and we went away to Atlanta, and then came back to Raleigh, and then back to Winston-Salem.
Okay. So, well, now, what, just to get, how old are you? I know it's kind of a personal question, but how old are you?
I'm 101 and a half.
Wow. You look fantastic.
I know. People don't believe it, and they've never believed how old I was. I guess I just act old.
Or maybe act young.
I act old and look young, I guess. I don't know which way it is.
Well, now, so what was it like? So you mainly grew up, did you say in Raleigh or in Davidson County?
I grew up partly in Davie County. When I was a kid. When I was a kid, I had to go to school late because I was sickly. I had chicken pox, smallpox, and whatever those other poxes were. And Mom said she had to stay awake about 6 weeks because whooping cough and so on. So anyway, I was sickly, and I had to go to school late. Then they had separate schools, as you know. And we were the only blacks, basically, in a family with all whites. So we kept the family from being a ghetto. So we played together in the playhouse just a little. But basically I stayed at home. I was the girl that was there, and Mom did not believe that girls and boys should play too much together. So she sort of kept me home. My brothers were pretty rambunctious. They loved to explore. And they all would have been engineers had they gone to school or had we had schools closer. Because they took the car down, they took the sewing machine down, they investigated everything. My little dolls that I would get for Christmas, they would take them apart to see what made them cry, talk. I would cry all day Christmas because Mom said, I'll get you another doll. But I knew Santa Claus couldn't bring it. I really believed in Santa Claus. So I was taught to be a little girl. And little girls did not do things that little boys did. So I had to read, memorize poetry, a Child's Garden of Verses. Mom had that book. And I remember the little poem when I was down beside the sea, a wooden spade they gave to me to dig the sandy shore. My hole was empty like a cup. In every hole the sea came up till it could come no more. I didn't go to the sea until after I had married. I married one of my teachers from high school, and he lived near the coast. And when my kids were born, we went to the coast. And I did that digging the sandy shore, and I did. I took a spade and digged the sandy shore, and surely enough, it's at sea level. And in that hole, the water did come up. And I remember that poem when I was, 5 or 6 years old.
Okay. Well, now, How would you describe as a young person growing up? When we're talking about 100, we're talking about what year was that?
I don't know. I was born in 1917, October the 7th, 1917.
So the 20s and 30s.
Oh yeah.
Back in the day.
I finished high school in 1935.
Okay. Well, taking it from like, and that was in Raleigh. Where'd you go to high school?
I didn't hear you.
No, where did you go to high school?
I went to high school here in Winston-Salem.
Oh, in Winston.
I went to the elementary schools out in Davie County until I got to be past the 7th grade. And promoted to the 8th grade, I graduated head of my class in the 7th grade. And when I got to the 8th grade, I had to go to another school because the schools were not evaluated as good schools. And Dad wanted us to go to college, as many of us as possible. So I had to come to Winston-Salem. So I have been away from home since I was, 13, 14 years old, I guess I was about.
Okay, I just gotta. Okay. Okay, now, so how would you describe what was it like to be black in Winston-Salem back in the early 30s?
Well, we didn't know too much about black and white here in Winston-Salem because we had everything in Winston-Salem, in the African American community or in the black community that we needed. We had the school, and it was a top school. Adkins High School, it's still a good school. It's on Old Greensboro Road now. It's moved from the place where it was, but it was an excellent school. We had Sunday school, we had churches, large. We shopped. Now, most of the shopping was in the mixed community. It was downtown. We didn't have many clothing stores in the black community, but we had everything else. And I didn't play with kids a lot in Winston-Salem because my aunt did not believe that those kids were going anywhere. There were a lot of kids who were out in the street and their parents did not force them to go and study or read. But in my family, we lived in an old schoolhouse where my dad and mom went to school. We lived here in Winston, or my mom and dad did, early on. And my daddy said that blacks were working at Reynolds for 10 cents an hour. And he thought that was horrible because he was a builder. He built houses. He learned that from his great-grandfather, Bird Kimbrough. And he made 50 and 75 cents an hour as a black. Whites made much more than that because we knew, and I did not know it at that time. I have learned since then that one reason why blacks are where they are and where we are economically is because of slavery. Mama would not let us read slave books. She said that the slavery was so horrible that she did not want us to hate white people. And so she would take the books that she had on slavery, and which came from the school where we had moved from Winston. And she would read those slavery books, she said, and cry herself to sleep.
Wow.
Because it was such a horrible life. She said, I did not want you to do it, and so I kept them from you. So most of what I have learned about slavery is what I have read since I left Davie County. In high school, we had black history. We did not know about our history except what my dad and my mother told me. Now, we did get that around the dinner table because every day that my dad came home, Mom would say, get your work out, get your schoolwork, bring your book, let me see what your assignment is, and take a cookie or get something and wait until your dad comes home so we could go to dinner. We never ate without my daddy being head of the table, and Mama was at the foot, and they would help our plates, and we would have dinner. And at dinner, my dad would talk about the great black people. I didn't know when I was a kid that there were any outstanding whites except the President of the United States. My daddy was very political from the newspaper. He had the newspaper, he read that every day. He also read the Bible. And he would talk, one of my brothers is named Charlie Taft, and that was a president. And he talked about the other presidents that we knew. Woodrow Wilson, I didn't know him because I didn't know that he did anything. But there were other presidents. He knew Taft. He knew the Republican presidents. My dad was a Republican. I did not know it at that time that was what it was.
Hang on just a second. We got to be careful with those page turns. Believe me, I can hear it. If you went back there, I probably wouldn't hear it, but you know. Well, so the segregation back in that period was pretty complete then. I mean, it was like two...
Segregation, if you just had one or two blacks, it was okay. Because usually when my mother went to the doctor, she went to the same place. But when my kids came along, it was worse. When I carried my daughters to the doctor, there was not a pediatrician. So they had to go to the white doctors. And the white doctors agreed with my husband and me that he would bring us in early before the white people came. So I would go to his office at 9 o'clock or 9:30 in the morning and take my kids in the same office, and then the whites would come after that. But there was no animosity. They were just like we were. The only thing I remember a lot about the white kids that I grew up with in David County, they were not very bright in math, and that was what I grew up in. And they wanted me to help them in arithmetic. Now some of them would not pass in arithmetic, and they would have to take it over again. So they knew I was making 1 or 2 grades a year because my dad was very smart, and his grandfather was smart, because I helped him make the houses. I would help him do the measurements. They would come and ask him he would ask them, how big do you want the house? How many rooms do you want in it? Do you want a 2-story house? Do you want this and the other? Now at that time, I did not know that. They did not provide for clothing to put what he called closets. They didn't provide for bathrooms because people at that time did not have bathrooms. Very few of them in Winston had bathrooms, and very few of them, or probably none, had bathrooms where we were. So we just made a house, and the way you got your clothes, you didn't have but Sunday clothes and clothes to go to school. You would hang those behind the door, and that's the way you lived. And I found out after going to Europe, a long time after that Marie Antoinette didn't have a bathroom either. They would go out in the pool and bathe, and those kinds of amenities came later. But they didn't worry us, and I didn't worry about them.
Okay, so that kind of gives a feeling of what it was like. Well, what motivated... Now we're going to jump ahead a little bit more in the civil rights area, and the civil rights in terms of when did you... Before I ask that, when you became active in the civil rights movement?
Oh, well...
And what motivated you to do that?
I'll tell you what motivated me. I think the thing that motivated me most was what my dad and mom. Dad wanted us to go to school together. Now, my daddy and mom were civil rights people, but they sat at home to talk about civil rights. He wanted us to go to school together, so he voted. He was one of the progressive people in David County, blacks who voted, and you could count them by hand. And we asked him, "Why are you voting? What do you mean by that?" And he said, "Well, I'm voting for kids to go to school together." He said, "I have traveled in the West and in the North, and kids go to school together. You learn in education." And they thought that education was the one thing that would help the whole country grow. So my daddy always talked about that. He talked about, as I told you, Reynolds having people to work for 10 cents an hour, black people. He said, "You don't want to do that. You want to go to school so you can get more. You can't live on 10 cents an hour." This is the way he would talk, and he would tell us about Booker Washington, who had Tuskegee. He would tell us about Simon Green Adkins, who had Winston-Salem State University, who thought. He would tell us about J.C. Price, who had the school in Salisbury. He would tell us about all of the great blacks that he knew and that he had read about. And that's what I heard as a kid. As I told somebody long ago, I didn't know that whites could be like Simon Green Adkins and J.C. Price, who could talk and orate and do the things that they could do. Because I went to church, a black church, and I had a black minister. My daddy was an elder in the church. He would talk, and he would talk about J.C. Price. He said J.C. Price was one of the greatest orators in the state of North Carolina. When I got up some size to say to people that I knew, grown people, "Do you know J.C. Price?" They said, "Yes. He was president of Livingston College." I said, "Well, was he an orator?" They said he was the greatest orator that ever lived. I said, "How do you know?" "My daddy, we went there. My daddy knew him. When he would speak and raise his hands up, people would stand. When he would go to the left or go to the right, people would move. He was such a great, he was a black man." So all I heard as a kid, and when I went to Adkins, I had black history or Afro-American history, whatever you want to call it. These men became alive because I then saw the pictures of them. We didn't have the video or that kind of thing. But up in the library, we had a room where she took all of the men and women, and there weren't too many women. Mary McLeod Bethune was one of the greatest women. We knew of Harriet Tubman. We knew that she was a black woman that did not like slavery. They put money on her head. They wanted to find her but she would take slaves and take them out of the South into the North so that they would be free. So that was the kind of background that I had. And when I heard about it and when we could talk about it, we didn't talk about it when we were like this. I wish we could have, but the reason why Mom and Dad didn't talk about it, they didn't want us to get embroiled with the little kids that we had to play with, that did not know and could not do anything about it. That I had a happy life. I didn't care anything about whether I was integrated or separated, because now whites come to my house, their families come to my house. We do this all together. So it didn't bother me. And going to school, my little playmates were all black at that time. It didn't bother me because I loved my math. And I knew that Mom and Dad loved us very much because they taught us at night. And we didn't roam the community. They wouldn't let us. And Mom said, "Don't eat at anybody's house. Come home and eat your dinner." because they will think that your dad is not taking care of you. So if you're at somebody's house and it's time to eat, say no thank you and come home. Now, we had a lot of fruit, and people ask me, how did you live to be 101? Well, that's not my calling. That's God's job. I love fruit. We had pears, apples, plums, peaches, strawberries, grapes, and we would sell them. And my baby brother and I would use that as our little spending money, because we would go pick up these grapes and apples and things as they would line up and to buy these things that we had, because the other people didn't have a lot of fruit like we had. And we loved fruit. I could eat peaches. We would eat them when they were green, and we would know that because we would get sick, and Mom said, you can't do that. You got to wait till they get ripe. But she loved for us to do, beans. We had a lot of beans. We had a lot of tomatoes, sweet potatoes, white potatoes. We did not have pork. As I recall the other day, we had one pig. And I don't remember what happened to that pig. I really don't. We did not have chitlins. We didn't have pig feet, pig ears, and that kind of stuff. It just was not in my house. We didn't eat it. Now, we did eat pinto beans. We did eat white beans. We ate lima beans. We ate string beans. We ate white potatoes. We ate red potatoes and fruit. And that was what I grew up on. And when I was pregnant, the baby book said, don't eat pig meat because that's not good for you. So I don't buy pork in my house now. We just don't have it. So
Right.
That was it. We ate like, I guess, the rest of the people. But if we didn't have something and the whites had it, they would exchange.
So you could, okay, now you'll be looking at me.
Okay.
Look at me. Okay. Can you
move
kind of the chair a little bit towards that table right there?
Okay.
Wait a minute, I'll give you a hand.
That would be, thanks,
Okay.
Jasper.
Hold on.
Be careful.
All right.
You want to move it to the right, my right?
That way,
Yeah.
yeah.
Move it to the right.
How about that?
That's good.
Okay.
And then the mic came off down there.
Okay. Oh, that's right. I stepped on it.
That's all right.
Put this
Let's
back
see,
up here.
where are you?
He
Where do you
wants
pin this?
he wants it up under this.
If you get, it clips onto the
Okay.
clothing. So the mic is aimed up.
Aimed up.
That's good. I think-
Is that good?
Okay, now you'll be looking right at me, just like you
Okay.
are.
I can look straight at you.
Okay.
All right. Just over a little bit. Okay. Whoop. Oh, yeah, that's good. Let me just. Okay, so let's jump ahead a little bit
Okay.
and talk about what was the first incident, or however you want to call it, where you got involved with a civil rights type situation?
I was in Raleigh. As I said, all the things that I went to were black, and I didn't go to any white function where I was rebuffed. You got it? So we were taught to think a lot of ourselves. And I've never had an inferiority complex in my life. I think I'm a little superior because I was smart. And I would be in the math class, I was one of the top ones. Won a little prize when I was in 5th grade. So when we had our own fair, the whites would have their fair 3 or 4 days, and the blacks would have their fair a certain number of days. So we would miss each other. And when I went to Raleigh, I had married, by the way. I married in 43. And we had a kid. We married in Atlanta, and we came back to North Carolina. And I was so glad to go to the fair because I had a little baby, well, pretty good size. And when I went up to play bingo, it was integrated, and the person said, "We don't serve niggers." I said, "Well, what do you mean you don't serve niggers? You can't play bingo." Well, that was the first time that I had been, first time that came to me. I just never heard of that. And I said to my husband, I said, "Let's go home because I can't play bingo. And I love bingo. And I don't want the kids to be here." So we went home. We didn't go back to the fair anymore. Well, what we did go to, they had separate things at State College. And there was a little place for blacks. They would always have a little, and that was, I realized that there was a difference in black and whites really after I got married and when I went to Raleigh, that they had a little place over here for blacks. And so I would get angry inside because I said, "Well, why do we have to go over on that little part? Why can't we sit where we want to sit?" And so my husband said, "Well, maybe maybe we don't need to go." And I said, "Well, it's okay with me, but my kids are missing a lot. There are concerts out there that I want the kids to hear. And there are Ringling Brothers would come." I said, he said, "You can look at it." And by the way, we were one of the first ones that got a television in Raleigh. First black family. He said, "Now we can look at the Ringling Brothers on television." Well, let me tell you, that was the best part of my life with the kids. Because then the kids could sit at home and look at Ringling Brothers. They could look at Howdy Doody. They could look at Mickey Mouse, the whole little bit. And we could sit at home. The only thing that they were missing playing with kids of that color. And I said, well, it didn't matter, as long as they had the same kind. But I got so angry, I would go home and talk about it. And it was at Shaw University. I was teaching. And I made a speech one day about segregation. I read a lot about it myself. And I belonged to one of the sororities, and there were 5 sororities on the campus. And I took as my text, maybe we can protest with 5, because I don't want to protest with Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority. That's one. Mary McLeod Bethune would come and speak to us. Mary McLeod Bethune was an outstanding black everything, educator. She cooked pies to make Bethune-Cookman. She was one of the first ones in Franklin Roosevelt's cabinet. She was with Mrs. Roosevelt to help her understand how black kids were so poor. She took Mrs. Roosevelt to the poorest areas of blacks in the South, where kids were starving, didn't have any food, didn't have anything. And Mrs. Roosevelt would go back home to tell Franklin, "You've got to do something. The black kids are just dying." And she got it from Mrs. Bethune. Well,
Okay,
she went on.
Hold on. Just, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I got to do one thing here. This is great stuff. But I'm gonna. Okay. Okay. Still looking at me, and I'm going to just zoom in here. Zoom back out. Okay. All right. So you gave that speech at Shaw University about segregation.
Absolutely. Just before they started marching, I gave that speech at a Vesper at Shaw University. And it was in the 60s, but I can't remember the date. I guess I could go back. Shaw is still there, you know. But what I did was, I asked them to march. I said, together, we can have a difference, because we have not made a difference in one sorority. I was speaking, I was Alpha Kappa Alpha. Well, the Alphas were there, the Kappas were there, the Sigmas were there, the Deltas were there, the AKAs were there. And I said, Mary McLeod Bethune told us that when you have one finger pushing something, you don't get very far. But if you put your hand together and knock, it'll move. So I think that all of the sororities and fraternities can protest second-class citizenship. And I didn't know that one of the kids who was in there, sitting there listening to me, because they were all black kids. I went to church that next morning at Sunday school. And a young man came up to me. He was small. He said, Mrs. Newell, we are listening. We are still repeating your speech that you made Sunday. I said, but where did you hear me? What school do you go to? He said, I go to Shaw. I said, well, you're a kid. He was little, he's short. He said, no, ma'am, I'm at Shaw University. I said, you were in the audience when I spoke? He said, yes, ma'am, and we are still talking about your speech. I said, well, I hope it'll take roots and bear fruit. He said, well, I think it will. And he walked away and I walked away, and I thought he was telling something unfair. I said, this young man didn't hear me, but then I knew he did. Well, anyway, the next day, which was a week, the kids were marching downtown. They said, Virginia, do you know that the kids are marching? I said, well, I told them to march at the speech. You did? I said, and one of the young men, they said, the young man that you said came to you is leading the march. I said, really? They said, yes, he's president of the Alpha fraternity. Well, I looked down and I said, oh my God, I guess I'll be fired. Because they did. If you raised a lot of hell when you were on the campus and made people upset, and white people anyway, you were fired. Well, I didn't care at that point. So we investigated, and we found out that not only did the kids march, but a number of them had been arrested. And so I just listened because I was teaching there, and I said, well, I wonder if my class is there. I wonder if my class is. So I would go on the campus and stick around, and I would wait until it's time for the students, and they wouldn't show up. So I called my husband. I said, look, the kids are not showing up. I said, I think I'll go home. And I did. Well, he came in and he said, well, what did you hear today? He said, well, I'll tell you what I'll do. He said, I can't march because they're putting the kids in jail. And he said, Virginia, both of us can't go to jail. Somebody has to stay home to take care of the kids. He said, I will call the mayor and tell the mayor if you could come down and have your lecture with the math students. and he called. He said, my wife, Virginia Newell, is teaching at Shaw University, and her classes in mathematics are in jail, and she wants to know if she can come and lecture. They said, let her come. We will put her in jail if she does. So he hung up. He was scared because he thought that both of us could be put in jail. So I stood and I waited, and every day I would go to class. You had, 3 classes. And they wouldn't show up. And one day, one little student showed up in calculus. And I said, oh my gosh, did I miss you the other day? He said, no, Miss Newell, I know you are marching. I said, and you are not marching? He said, no, ma'am. I said, okay, I respect you for not marching, but do you mind if I march? He said, oh, no, ma'am, I want you to. I said, now how can I help you if you are just the only one? He said, nothing except grade my papers. I said, you leave your papers here every day, and you know how to come to my class. And I will come and get your paper graded, and you come back the next day at the time and pick it up, and I will have your assignment. And we did that for at least 2 weeks.
Wow. Well, so at that point, kind of moving in a broad strokes, from that point on, would you consider yourself to be an activist?
Yes.
So what are some of the different things that
Not
you...
only at that point, my kids were little. Glenda she was not even old enough. When the marches started, kids want to march. And I allowed her to march, but I said she will have to be in front because she's so little. And when we started marching every day, the kids, and then they asked me to be on the committee because they had to have a committee that the whites were talking to. And they were asking the blacks to stop the kids from marching. We would negotiate. We would go back to the kids and they said, we are not going to stop because that's all they want us to do. If we stop, they will stop. But we're going to march until things open up. And I agreed with them. So I had to come home to my dad. My dad had retired then because he had built houses. But he said to me, and this really boosted me on, he said, honey, I've been reading about all of these kids marching. And I know how you feel about Jim Crow and segregation. You've never liked it. And I want to tell you, if you go to jail, I'll come and be on your bond. Now I want to tell you, that made me 10 feet high. And I went back and told my friends, I said, now I'm going to be more bold than I was because my dad told me he would come and get me out. So we marched, but what they did not, they wouldn't put me in. We did everything that we could. Anybody that was 40 or over at that particular time, they didn't want them. They wanted it. And so my president went down. They went and opened the jail and the kids would not come out. There were 98 of them. And they had to call the president. Nelson Harris was president of Shaw University. And they asked him to come down and get the kids out of jail. And he went down, and the big newspaper, it's still down there, the News and Observer, he was congratulating the kids as they came out of jail. And he told the newspaper, are you going to punish those kids? He said, we teach that at Shaw University. We tell them that they are first-class citizens and that anything that demeans them, don't be a part of it. And that's how the kids came. Because they didn't have any more space to put anybody in jail. It was full of our kids. And so from that day on, I went to the governor. I think the governor was, I don't know whether it was Terry Sanford at that time. I was on the committee. and we would have a fundraiser and march on the palace, not the palace, the place where he lived. We marched on him one night, and he had a confrontation with the kids. They said, he said, well, good evening. He said, you know, you are not here at my invitation. They said, Governor, this is our home. We don't need an invitation. This is the taxpayers. I didn't know that our kids had grown up so. He says, well, let's make a deal. He had a fundraiser for the Symphony of North Carolina. All of these rich white people were in his house, and they came out on the veranda crying. And what they did, some of them, the kids left because I was close to them, as many as I could tell. I said, I think he's trying to say he wants to talk to us. He said, would you form a committee and come to my office tomorrow? So finally, they stopped and turned around, and the older ones left first, and they came on. But a lot of those women who were there with that symphony followed us to the campus. We were in the basement of one dormitory, and they came in and cried and said, what could we do? We sympathize with you. We know what you're going through. And we said, lady, or whatever it was, or gentleman, or whatever, all we want is first-class citizenship. We're tired of segregation. We're tired of Jim Crow. Oh, they talked. We didn't have to get grown people to talk for those kids. They talked themselves. And so they left. They said, whatever we can do, if you tell the governor, we will help him. So the governor did. He called in the businessmen of Raleigh and said to them, I want you to open up. I'll be responsible for whatever. And it was less than a week, everything that could open, the restaurants, that's what we wanted. My kids were asked to go to the hotel, and we were sitting on our luggage. Deanne and Glenda, they were little things. And I said, we will sit here until about 4 o'clock in the morning, but we got to go home and take our baths and go to school. And we did do that. But some of them, all the kids were out in front of Robert E. Lee Hotel before it tore down on Fayetteville Street. And they were on blankets and whatever they were on. And we had one person from Congress there. He had come down with one of the people at the Embassy of Liberia in Washington. And he came out, he said, oh my God, Virginia, I'm called to Washington, but I can't leave you here. So he started off and came back and got on the ground with us. A lot of them were whites from State College, because we had called as many as we could to come with us, and there were a number of white kids there, so they were black and white. And so things opened. And when they opened, they called a certain ones of us who had funds to go and eat in these restaurants. So I was called, and I said, well, I'm going, and I have to take my kids. So I went to dinner and had no problems at all. I understand there was one restaurant where the manager said, we are going to have blacks tomorrow. If you need to come and get your money, come and get it and leave, because you've got to treat them like you do everybody else. I understand one restaurant in Winston-Salem had 1 or 2 people who said, we can't serve them. He said, come by the office and get paid. And from that day on, one restaurant was first, and it had so many people it couldn't accommodate. Then the next day, there were more open. And so from that day on, we just waited because things were in court, and they were waiting until they changed the laws.
Okay, I'm going to move in a little tighter here. This is great stuff.
And during that time, SNCC was made.
Go ahead and talk about that.
SNCC, that was what John Lewis, was it John Lewis? That was created on the campus of Winston-Salem of Shaw University. SNCC. And
Did you go to the 50th anniversary?
Students Non-Coordinating, whatever.
Student
it was.
Nonviolent Coordinating Committee.
You remember that. Well, that was born on there. And a lot of people were on campus at Shaw because it was the black college in the area, and they had started it. And I was teaching. And by that time, the kids, a lot of kids just stayed out. They had to go to school for an extra year because they had stayed out of class so long until they couldn't make it up. So we just dangled along until school closed. And then, when during the summer, I think things were changing. But that was basically it. But Raleigh was never the same after that because the theater opened, the restaurant opened, and all of the things opened. And the only thing that we remember vividly, they did punish Shaw. They condemned Shaw University. Now, they wanted to get back at us. We couldn't meet in our own dormitory because they had the city to say that it was not fit for us to walk in. We went to the black churches, and I'm here to tell you that black ministers were just as adamant as the whites. They said, you are not going to meet in our sanctuary. We went from one place to the other, and the only ones that did open their doors were the Episcopalians or the Presbyterians. But the Baptist churches were adamant they were worse than the whites.
And why do you suppose that was?
Absolutely. And one little white boy, I'll never forget him. I don't know his name. The president did tell the kids they would get something from, they kept getting things from downtown, and they thought they were going to close Shaw University. So, as they would get messages from downtown, which did not come to us, that would be secondhand. When they found out some little white boys were living in the dormitory with our kids, that's when they made a determination. Because the whites said, that was against the law for white and black students to be together. So the little boy that had really he was a great person. He would lead the line, and his grandmother and great-grandmother and mother and father had put him out. A nigger lover. He wasn't supposed to be at home. And that night he came to me, and he said, I know he got the message that night that he had to go. And he walked out barefoot. I'll never forget him, because it was in the summer. And he said, your president can't go down to Robert E. Lee with a tails on, and I could go down barefoot with jeans on. And now they are making me leave because I'm helping you to go into that hotel like people. And I said, well, we hugged him. I told him goodbye, and I hope him well. But that was what they did. Then they condemned Shaw. We could not go in it because that's where we had our concerts and where we would go and talk. And they started condemning the dormitories. So we had to get all of the white students away from the campus. And that's when the president or his assistants or whoever they were, they said, well, let's be quiet now and see what's going to happen. And surely enough, things started opening. And that was when the civil rights, when the March on Washington. I was invited with my family to go to New York to make a speech for the Lord Carey Convention at Mount Vernon, New York, at the Baptist Church. And when they called, they said, where's Virginia Newell and her children? We were in New York crying at the hotel, waiting to make a speech for the kids at Mount Vernon Baptist Church in New York.
Okay, wow. So those days at Shaw, you were teaching there and a leader.
Yeah. That was where it started for me.
Start for you, and then take it from there in broad strokes. Now, what year was that? Was that during the war, World War II?
No. I taught at Shaw from 60 to 65.
Oh, 60, 65, okay.
I was at University of Chicago from 58 to 59. I taught at Shaw 1 year, and then I came here. I taught at Shaw during that time that they were very, and then I came here. So I was here the rest of the time. Now, they didn't do much in Winston, but they did sit in. They marched, but here was a public college. I left a private college where we could do more. The private colleges did most of the sit-ins and all of that. And the public colleges were by the property owners, and they couldn't do as much.
Well, right. They're dependent on the state for money, so...
Huh?
They were also dependent on the state to get their
Absolutely.
money, so they knew they had them.
Depending on the state to get open, because they could have closed them in a minute.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, now, speaking about private colleges, Bennett College over in
Bennett is
Greensboro.
private, absolutely.
The Bennett Bells, they called them, who
Yes,
were active.
oh yes. Oh, they marched with the kids. I think every college, even some of the public colleges, but not wholesale, like Shaw and Bennett. Now, A&T marched more of a public college than any of the others. They were, the president there, well, he had to be a real man, because the kids, then it was not integrated. They had all boys and all men, and men were hard to deal with, and women. You know, you could tell women and they would move back, but these men didn't. And they didn't care if the president, they would embarrass him. He would come to the Bennett, to A&T's college, and one of the students would embarrass him. And the president would go out and have a heart attack. I mean, you know, that's what I meant happened. There was a lot that happened during that time. A lot of sorrow. And I didn't get to do all of it because my husband sort of kept us, I guess, in check. Well, women can't do as much. And then I had 2 girls. I couldn't leave my children. I didn't go out and spend the night and that kind of stuff and leave my children for somebody else to take care of.
Well, so now you were in Winston.
All right. In Winston, I came in 65. I didn't do any marching here. The only thing that I did was I was elected to be an alderman downtown. I was the first woman, or well, 2 of us came in about the same time. And I was outspoken. I guess I was real outspoken as a woman on the board, and they thought that we were going to hell with a handbasket.
Now, alderman is city council. Is that what
That's
that
correct.
means?
City council now.
So you were one of the first
Yeah,
black
that's right.
women to be on the city council of Winston-Salem.
That's right. I was one of the first and was chairman of the finance committee. So I had quite a bit of power. And this area where you live, where I'm living now, I had 17,000 people under my jurisdiction. And I had more than that. I had 5 times 75 because I had 5 wards. So I guess I made a little dent. There were a number of things that I brought to the city, the shopping center. We didn't have much of anything in East Winston. I brought housing, I brought the Black Bank, I brought the shopping center. I just brought a lot of things because we didn't have anything. And so whatever I would make up my mind to do, the people would support me because I supported them. It was almost like Biden, quid pro quo. And when they wanted anything, I would help them. And 3 Republicans got on the board while we were there. So the 3 blacks got with the 3 Republicans, and we got a lot done. You know, it wasn't that they loved me, but they needed something and we needed something. So we got together like politicians. Now, it wasn't a matter of we were segregating, they were segregating. We were already segregated. So.
Well, so you would be on the city council.
Say what?
What year were you elected to the?
77.
Oh, 77.
Yes.
So by that time, there was integration of
Pretty good.
facilities.
It was
or whatever.
integration, but not integration. See, the rules had been made because Brown versus Board of Education was made, I think, in 48.
54.
I believe, and they had not integrated the schools. They had done something, but every time I spoke, you know, I would talk about that.
Well, what year, in other words, like City Hall in downtown Winston, in 1961, as a black person, could you just go in there like anybody else and do whatever
No.
you needed to do, pay the water bill or something?
Yeah. Now that you could always go to those places. Those places were open where they would get money from you. You got it? Now, even Salem College turned away black professional women from concerts. I myself was turned away from the Easter sunrise service, my first year teaching at Adkins, and my black friend. Easter sunrise, God's Acre, and there were 5 of us, and the police blew the whistle and said, "You blacks come out so that they can go to God's Acre." So I didn't go to it, but then I taught it at Salem College. Salem College is right now it's going in problems with finance, but I taught it. I was one of the first adjunct blacks to teach at Salem. And they wanted me to march, and I did. I marched 1 or 2 times. But it didn't bother me about being with white or blacks.
Well, now, speaking about, just as an example, Salem College.
Yeah, but they were as racist as you can be. Now, let me tell you, my daughter, the one that you saw on television, went to Miss Porter's school. Miss Porter's school is where Jackie Kennedy, you know where they went. All right. Litton Chuck was the head mistress, or head master you call them, they had a private school at Academy. When my daughter went to Miss Porter's, the first black, Litton Chuck saw me one day. "Why did you send your daughter to my college, to my high school?" I said, "You weren't ready for Glenda." "What do you mean? We've been integrated for a long time." I said, "Litton Chuck, isn't any point in telling a lie. You know, and I know, that you didn't have black kids down there, and Glenda would not have allowed you to have her, because she wouldn't have taken it." And I walked away from her. But she stood me up. and another rich man, Gordon Haynes. You know Haynes? When they found out that my daughter was at Miss Porter's, Gordon's wife saw me one day. She said, Virginia, I gotta talk to you. I said, okay, let's talk. She said, I know your daughter's at Miss Porter's. I said, yeah, they asked for her because I was at Yale teaching, and one of the persons who was in school with Jackie was teaching there, and she said, we want a black student. Why can't we take your daughter? I said, well, I want to see what you're going to do with her. I said, she's not going to be second class. Well, anyway, she got in that school. And let me tell you, she got to be head of the school. My daughter was the first president of Miss Porter's and the first black there, Glenda. She said, I'll let you smoke when you get it. She promised them everything. And they thought she was going to do it. They said, Glenda, we thought you were going to let us smoke. She said, well, I tried. It's beyond me. But anyway, she's been to, I let her go to all of the parties she could go to, skiing, debutante parties, and all of that. When she had her babies, her roommate took her 2 kids and kept them over the weekend while she had fun with her husband. To show you what kids, a lot of them don't think of colors. Now, she had one roommate when we went up to eat. They had one big place where they had the kids. She said, Mom, when you and Dad come, I have to get you a place to go. And this little girl was she had 4 roommates, three roommates, and she was the 4th. That mother never did come to me and announce herself. And I didn't care. Because everybody was falling all over us because Glenda was the president of the class. And you know what she was doing. And the rest of the mothers we had known, because when Glenda couldn't come home for Christmas or Thanksgiving or whatever it is, they would take her to their house. She was just like one of them. And Glenda didn't know the difference, but she knows the difference now. She got a lot of discrimination, segregation after she left Miss Porter's. But at Miss Porter's, they treated her like she's been on the board. She's taught for commencement. She's gotten other blacks to go to Miss Porter's. She's gotten black kids to go to Miss Porter's. And she's well thought of. But they didn't have blacks before that time. So to tell you about kids, as I told them, I went to Yale to work in the 60s. And we had high potential kids. They were 11th and 12th graders. Low performing in the classroom. Half white, half black. We were teaching them a modern math. And those kids were great, and I was asked to come to Yale University to get my doctorate. But my husband wouldn't let me go. He said, you are married with 2 kids. I don't see the red. Is it on?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, it is. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
All right. But I'm saying I had a great time. I was there 3-4 summers. Stayed in the Yale Trumbull Swamp Suite. And at night we would look at all of these old folks like Faulkner and all of these people who had gone there and spent the night. And we stayed in the same with maids and things 3 times a day. But it didn't go to my head. Yeah, I could teach math. I could teach math anywhere. Yale, Harvard, and we had Harvard people at University of Chicago. And I was asked to go there and get my doctor, but my husband said, you are married, you got 2 kids. and we are trying to make it there. So you can't go.
Well, so now you spent most of your life here in Winston.
Yeah.
Well, it sounds
Most
like you've
of my
been-
life
yeah,
has
but-
been spent, as I go back now, most of my life has been spent in Winston-Salem.
So is it, in terms of your work, in other words, you broke new ground by being one of the first members of the board of aldermen as
woman.
black woman.
Yeah.
Did you ever encounter any hostility from, say, white people for doing that? Or, I mean, looking back all these years, were there many times when you felt? Did you ever feel physically in danger for doing your civil rights stuff?
Not really, not any more than any person who is a public servant. A public servant, you are shooting duck. Somebody could come in and mow us all down at one time. But I was not picked out as a person to get. They may have been disappointed with my voting. They knew where I was because I told them when I was elected that I forget about Democrat, Republican, and I look at the people. And whatever they need, I respond. And I found out when I went to the board that people of my color and my visibility didn't have nearly as much as the rest of you. So most of my time was spent with my ward. I wanted to bring my ward up to the others. And I voted with Democrats and I voted with Republicans to try to do that. And everybody saw it. I don't think I had no threat. The only time I had a threat was when I was getting rid of people who were druggies and people in the community who were being unfair to old folk and children. I would go after them. I would go after them with a vengeance. And I think they said they wanted to get me. I said, well, you get me, but be sure to get me good, because I've got a following, and they'll get you. And you get out of my ward with what you're doing. You know it's wrong. You know you are doing this to the kids and the dads and maybe the moms, and I'm not going to have it. And I told the mayor, the policeman, I told them all. And the nuns, I'll never forget, one night we were marching. We were marching because they had spotted an apartment where the druggies were just coming in, selling. And this woman who wanted to start it, she said, Virginia, I said, of course, I will go with you. I said, who are you going to have? She said, well, 5 of us will be marching tonight. I said, well, count me in. And when we got through, one of the nuns in the city, she said, Alderman, I pray for you every night. I know you are not afraid. I said, I can't be afraid to march in the area where the people elected me to go. I said, would you? She said, I don't know, but I'm praying for you. I appreciated that. And I said, maybe the nuns carried me over. They threatened us, but I didn't bother with that. Only when we were getting rid of the druggies. They didn't threaten us when we wanted to move. We had kids who were supposed to go to school, and they would go to a house of prostitution. And I broke that up. They would go to a house where there was liquor. And as soon as I knew there was liquor there, I went to it. And they would come and pour the liquor out, or the beer or the wine or whatever they had. It would roll down the. And he said, honey, you are powerful. I said, I'm not. I'm doing what I was elected to do. And in 16 years, I changed my community. I changed the fabric of the East Ward. And they know that I have been, that's why I got all these sayings. The people call me together, including the mayor. He's sweet as he can be. But people appreciate you doing the right thing. And I did the right thing. And one lady said, well, where did Christianity come in? I said, Christianity was in everything that I did. Love thy neighbor as thyself and everybody else. Love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, mind, and soul, and love thy neighbor as thyself. So when you do, I didn't treat anybody all wrong. I didn't steal anything. I didn't kill anybody. But I'll tell you one thing, I changed that attitude. And one man came to me and he said, lady, I wish I had heard you 6 months ago. I said, you did. I got on the air. I wrote. I did everything. He said, yes, you did. But I've just lost my daughter in one of these houses that you said, tell me about it, and I will have it changed. They killed my daughter, and I've got 2 grandchildren that I have to raise. But I'll tell you one thing. From now on, if I see anything wrong, I'll call you. I said, sir, please do, if you're afraid. I'm not. And he did. And I've changed. We've changed. People now hug me. Thank you for doing this. Thank you. I said, I didn't do any more than what I was asked to do. And I spoke to a white church just last Sunday. And the preacher got through and he said, lady, you have challenged us. And we are still talking about 100 white people and 5 blacks. I said, you know what's wrong? I said, the kids can't write. I said, they can't spell, they can't do anything. And these people are taking the money. Look what the government. I said, they're taking the money. The low-income kids don't have books in their home. You know what's wrong? And you are voting for them. And coming to church, grinning, and thinking that you're going to heaven. Maybe you will. I said, I'm just going to tell you what I would do. I said, now I can't walk much. But if they would start walking, I'd take my gizmo and somebody would push me along. Because I know what's wrong. I know what's wrong with this country, and we're going to have to change it. But we are accepting too much. I said, segregation has no business lasting as long as it did. I said, 200 years we were enslaved, and the whites got all the money. We didn't get anything but chicken feet, pig ears, pig snoots, and pig things. And I said, and then we were postulated that we were dumb and ignorant. And you believed it. And now you had a black president, smarter than any of us. And you know it. Now why are we still where we are? You asked a question.
Yeah. Well, well, let me ask you this. This is an incredible interview. I told you I teach at UNCG, and UNCG is now 40% minority. It's the highest within the UNC system, excluding HBCUs like A&T or whatever. In other words, 40% of the students, mostly African American. We also have more and more Hispanic students, Asians, Native Americans. The gamut, and it's wonderful. I mean, I've taught there 25 years, and I've seen the change from the time I got there. More and more minority students, and more faculty too.
And more. You're saying more and more minority students are going to school.
Yeah, but
a lot of them can't because of economics.
Right.
Because it's so expensive now to go to school.
Even a place UNCG is pretty reasonable compared to Wake Forest. You could go to UNCG for. It's
about 40 or 50. I think Glenda's daughter, Deanne's daughter, went to Choate School where Kennedy went. I think she had to pay, her husband had to pay about $40,000 for high school That's where she went before she's now in the Wake Forest Medical School. But you know how much I paid for my college? $1,200. 1,200 and about $12 or $15. It was $303 $303 a year to go to school.
Oh, it's $1,200 altogether.
For 4 years. You got it?
Yeah.
Name it. I went to Talladega, Alabama.
Wow.
And it was $7.10 to ride on the train. And we were too poor for me to come home for Christmas. So we would cry and say, I'll be home for Christmas. You know that Christmas carol? A lot of us were on campus because our parents just didn't have the money to bring us home.
Yeah. Well, now, let me ask you this from the point of view of the young people today, whether they're in college or high school or out of college or working. In other words, how about their motivation in terms of being politically active? Of course, we've seen Black Lives Matter and other movements going on led by young people. But how are you feeling about the state of the civil rights movement now? We're talking about Reverend Barber and the poor people. He started up kind of a new poor people's campaign for economic justice and all that. Do you think people are? Oh.
That's that's Miss Porter.
Oh.
How you doing?
Hello, how are you?
We're conducting
So,
an interview.
Are you asking me about the situation today?
Yes, and because one of the reasons that it's important to do interviews with people such as yourself is to record your experiences so that future generations, whether they're historians or people, can learn and also be inspired, because you in your stories and people like Jasper have shown a lot of courage in your life. And what with the rise of right-wing people like our president and all the many, or our state government in Raleigh, what they're doing with gerrymandering, voting districts, all that stuff that we have been protesting with the Moral Monday movement and all that. So, how are you? What are your thoughts about the new generation and what all the things that they and we have to try to change?
Well, I'm going to be frank with you. I have said many times, I'm glad I came up when I did. Although to other people, it may seem like it was hard. I had a good background with my childhood.
Hang on 1 second.
Okay.
I got to do one thing. Here's that thing.
Okay. I think I said to you, I'm glad that I came up when I did. It may have looked bad. I had to walk to school and back, but I'm 101 now, and I even have my thinking faculties. And I thank God for that. I tried to do what my mother and dad asked me to do. I was blessed with a mom and dad all my life. And they didn't force us, but they talked to us like we were people. And they knew what the situation was, and they thought that education was going to be the thing that helped. But unfortunately, our kids are not being educated now. Now, the kids who started with Black Lives Matter, I think they know where they are going. But that's a group beyond this little group that's coming up now. We've got about 3 generations of kids that have not been educated. Segregation has not been good to black people, mainly because black parents have not stuck with their kids as they should have. And I probably shouldn't say that. My parents were there at all times when the teacher or the principal wanted us there. We had school at home every night.
I hope she can't be she can't be running the dishes or any. She's oh, I'm gonna shut this off for a second. Okay, we're going. Go ahead.
Now, as I said to you, I had a good childhood. It was fun. We had no fricases between the two races. We got along fine. As I told you, my mom and dad, I've never known them to have a spat. They were together in rearing us. We both went out the same door. We would go to mom and say, well, maybe we go to that party tonight. What did your daddy say? What did your mama say? And by the time you got through answering that question, the party was over. So we all had the same thing. We went to church every day. We tried to do Christianity. We did not. Mama taught us that all people were made of God. And that if you treated one badly, you were guilty of treating them all. So we had to be kids that loved each other. Mom and dad loved us. Now today, and they taught us black history. A kid that does not know where he came from, I don't know whether he knows or not where he's going. I don't believe that the kids of this day, the whites nor the blacks, know enough about slavery and Jim Crow and discrimination to know what is wrong. I don't know that because I don't think they are taught. I know parents have not taught them. I know black parents have not taught them because when I talk to black parents, they'll say, how did you get that? I said, oh, I learned at home. At home? I didn't learn anything like that at home. I said, in a church. What? Well, I want to tell you, 2 or 3 of our generations are almost gone. And I don't know where they're going. Now they have stopped cursive writing. You can't sign your name. The delivery of mathematics is not the same. They are doing it all through the computer. Kids don't have computers at home. If the computer's down in the shop, they have to tell you to wait. They can't take a paper and pencil. It's all out. So the whole realm of education, I think this was done purposely. When we integrated, I think that our country was so riled up between black and whites that they wanted to hold the blacks back and teach their kids, and the government came in and told them they had to make them the same. So it's almost like the Tower of Babel. Nobody's understanding anything. And the whites don't understand what's going on with these computers as well as the blacks. And I don't know whether we will stop or whether we will get a president. Some of these people who are running for president know what's wrong. And if one of them gets in, there will be some hope. But if the wrong one stays in, including the one that we've got now, it could be a regime change. And I think he wants to be a Gestapo, he wants to be a authoritarian, and he has exacerbated the races. And everybody, immigrants, all the people who are not like him and who are not wealthy. So I feel sorry for the people that are coming up. Only thing I can do is pray, because I can't do much by myself. We are trying now to start a little school where we are getting 50 or 60 kids who can read and who can do math and who can do some of the old school. But I don't know whether we can do that or not. And that's going to be the only thing. And in the school system, we don't have books. How can a kid learn math when he doesn't have anything to go home with? That's why you learn it. You learn. My dad had taught us. I told you, he had math at home.
Wow. Okay, I think that's the big statement. I'm gonna widen it out.
Okay, come on back, Jasper.
I'm back.
Anything else you want to add? I mean, you touched on this thing about reading. People don't read anymore.
No.
If you go in a house, they don't have any books. They don't like to read. If you don't like to read, I see their college students, they hate it when they have to read a chapter in a textbook. If they don't even enjoy reading a novel or something, then why are they going to... And then if they can't read, then the writing isn't so good.
Absolutely. See, when you can't read and write, see, that's what they did with slavery. That's why they kept them enslaved. And the ones who did learn to read and write, like Frederick Douglass, he got out. See, those that learn to read and write, you can move above the fray. But those who can't, where are they going? What are they going to do for a living? This is a technological world. It's not going back. It may, if somebody else takes over. But I don't know. I have 2 great-great-grands. And as I have told their parents, I just pray for them. I hope you send them to a private school where things... Look how many years we had books. Harvard and Yale, they still have books, don't they? UNCG, all of those places have books. And why did they take books away from the kids in public school? Come on, you tell me why. That is a decided decision that was made, I believe, to keep the blacks back. And I think one young man, he was white, he came to my house to help me with the computer. I got a WOW computer. And he did it, and I said, well, what do you charge? He said, oh, I don't charge him anything. He took about 30 minutes, and he did what he had to do. Well, we stood and talked. And I said, well, young man, when you grow up, I want you to be mayor of the city. He laughed. He said, I'm not even married yet. So anyway, we were talking, and we kept talking. And he said, well, I'd like to say something. He said, do you know what's wrong with the white people? Now, he was white as a sheet, the only one in... He said, the whites are mad because they are in the minority. They are going to be in the minority. He said, and they are mad right now. I said, well, what are they going to do about it? He said, I don't. Now, he was a young man. He said, I'm getting married. He told me that. I think he's in his early 20s. But he sees that. And they say that's what Trump did to get in. He told the people, he's telling them now, the Democrats are on you. They are making you the bad guy. And you better come with me because I'm the only one who can help you. And that is going to sell. And what Trump wants, as I have watched him all during the time that he was politicking, he believes, I thought he was kidding, he believes he's God. And the people believe it. I thought he was just joking like you do at a fair. But he is dead serious, and the people who listen are dead serious. And God help this country. Because all of us are going to be there. And if somebody don't turn up and turn around and say, you know, we're going in the wrong direction, we got to change it. And a president can do that. But less than a president, I don't know who can. And that's the last thing I want to say. Because when you take reading from kids, when you take their values, when you upset them and do like they did when we messed up all the languages, God did that in the books. One couldn't hear the other one talk and didn't know what they were saying. You know when that happens. Was it Tower of Babylon? That was what it was. And I believe that is going to come to pass if we don't change. And I think that 2020 will probably be the deciding.
Wow. Yeah, this is an extremely serious period. Not much different in a way from the late 30s.
I'm wishing something different and praying. Because we can have a great... Now we've got all the technology. We've got everything to make people happy. But there's... Look, young people committing suicide.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, what is that?
Well, but there's also the ecological crisis of...
Huh?
There's also the fact that we're destroying the earth with pollution and plastic and cars and too many people.
And look, climate change.
Right. We see it right here with rain, you know. And I think people instinctively know that we're in deep trouble, but they also feel like there's nothing you can do about it. There's kind of a sense of passive.
Exactly.
With the college students, I get upset with them because they'll see something and they won't say anything. I know that they're thinking, but they won't say anything.
Exactly.
And that gets frustrating because I'm a 60s person, and
I know.
you know, I've been protesting a good part of my life trying to change things.
I do too. But you see it, don't you?
Yeah. That's why I feel a lot of despair, to be honest with you. These days I feel depression and despair because it's hard to have, what's for dinner, while we're thinking that the whole world, if he gets in again, we could have a dictatorship.
Of course.
You know.
Yeah.
And then you start rounding people up and killing them.
Do you want a dictator where you can't speak in your house?
Right.
You know that they tell me under Hitler, I was in school with one or two of the German professors that came there, and their daughters and I were in school together in physics. And they told me about Hitler, what was happening under him. And they would have to whisper and not talk loud. Now, do you want to and some of them don't know they have never read Mein Kampf or heard of Hitler. They don't know what's going to come. And this is what it said. In a democracy, and it came up in the Greek state, I believe it was, you have to be intelligent in order to vote for the people who will represent you. And if you are not intelligent as to who to vote for to represent you, then you lose a democracy. It's a young government, and it could be lost. Trump wants a dictatorship. I'm the greatest. I've had the greatest 2 years of any, and they believe it.
Yeah. Well, listen, we should probably wrap it up because it's been, it's 5:15 and
okay.
It's been a beautiful interview. So I'm going to.
Thank you so much for coming back.
Oh, thank you.
I hope.